I'm sure that many of you, just like me, must be thinking that why phones look pretty much the same today, why they offer pretty much similar things, why smartphone companies have not been innovating as aggressively as they would do a couple of years ago. To address all of that and to help you understand even more, we have with us on show today Mr. Amit Boni. Amit has been serving the mobile industry for a long time, and before joining Smartron as VP for Sales and Marketing, Amit has played a key role in Motorola India. Welcome to Take It Out, Amit. Amit, I would like to start with a very basic question with you,
Sure.
as I always do. How far do you think the smartphone market has come today, ever since the first iPhone was introduced, and where does it actually stand now?
Well, I think, and if you're talking specifically in India context, I think we're still a long way to go. If you see the per capita smartphone penetration in India is still low. The TAM, or the total addressable market in India on the phones, is probably upwards of 200 million units, probably a little more than that. But if you see the number of smartphones only, we are still looking at about 120, 125 million as the total addressable market for the year. So fundamentally, there is still a lot of people out there who are going for feature phones. And then you have a bunch of people, who are really buying not so great quality smartphones in early price tiers, entry price tiers. So I mean, from purely India context, I think there is still a long way to go before we could say everyone in India has a smartphone in hand. So the prospects out here, the transition out here, it will still unravel over the next 4 to 5 years.
But Amit, every phone today has something similar to offer. What do you think is actually holding these companies back? Is it lack of innovation, market saturation, or something else totally?
From my perspective, there is definitely not saturation. Lack of innovation, yes, you can practically accuse the industry of that. There is very limited work that's happening in terms of hardware innovation. Most of the work that's being done is happening at the chipset level. Those guys are doing some really good work to make sure that, with a quick charge from Qualcomm and so on and so forth. There's a lot of good stuff that's coming on that side. But otherwise, from a pure hardware side, very limited work has happened over the last 5-8 years in terms of innovation. I think a lot of it has got to do with how the industry is structured, how a lot of people essentially look at success, not necessarily in terms of innovation, but in terms of how they do market shares, right? If you see, even in India, there are these articles that come out every 3 months saying, now this is number 1, that's number 2, that's number 3, and there is this almost huge hyperbolic conversation that starts happening around that, which tells you the mindset that a lot of companies come out with, right? They're thinking about, how do I make the numbers, how do I sell more, rather than thinking, how do I generate tremendous amount of intellectual property, how do I innovate, what makes me come out with some great products for the end consumer.
So Amit, where do you see the mobile industry going? I mean, what do you think is going to be the next defining factor in the smartphone space?
I think, so before I answer that, let's take a step back. If you see fundamentally phones, when we look today, we look at them as a standalone product, right? So every time when we're saying there's a good device or there is not such a good device, it's essentially spec to spec comparisons. People will say, oh, this is a more RAM now, this is a bigger display, there is more internal storage. That's what generally people talk about. Now, as long as that stays, there is not much that's going to happen. But I think there is a growing understanding, and I mean, I can tell you from Smartron's perspective, I mean, when we are doing a bunch of devices, we are focusing on ecosystem, because we realize, we understand that it's not only about putting great hardware. What consumers are looking for are great use cases.
Amit, having said that, there is a lack of innovation in the market. The smartphone space has been facing lack of innovation right now. But then there are a set of companies which are actually trying to make things better, which are actually coming up with new concepts. And one of them is modular concept. So how far do you think this concept can go? How is it emerging? Or does it even have the potential to appeal to masses out there?
I think modularity is a phenomenally good concept. Unfortunately, I don't think companies so far have been able to come out with something that truly does justice to that thought process. As a concept, I mean, if somebody tells you don't have to replace your overall device, but you can go and, for example, replace a camera if there's a new camera sensor coming in, or you can replace the speaker and get a better speaker coming out for your device. I think at a thinking level, at a very eclectic level, there are some really interesting thoughts out there. But it also needs to be seamless for an end consumer. It cannot be either highly priced, so much so that your modular solutions are at times costing as high as your device itself, or that the use cases are limited or difficult to do. There have been various attempts by a multitude of companies which have tried to do modularity in one form or another, but I think there is some way to go on that. I think it needs some simple use cases. How can people almost go to a marketplace and pick up a appendage and then snap that onto your device and make it do so much more better. So I think the future of smartphones, or maybe a lot of other consumer electronics, will be modularity. Are we there yet? No. I think it's going to be another 4-5 years down the line till you will see modular use cases coming, which will be more widespread.
And talking about the innovation, how promising do you find the concept of augmented reality ready smartphones?
If you ask me, I think from a pure tech next steps, because I see innovation in 2-3 different facets. I see innovation in terms of use cases, I see innovation in terms of business models, and then you see innovation purely in terms of technology additions. I think from a pure technology addition perspective, your Internet of Things, your AR, your VR are next steps where your devices, your phones and these technologies will become a lot more connected. There's a bunch of work that can happen, right from as simple things as sports themed cafes to actually doing a lot of education work. I think augmented reality, virtual reality, a lot of this could play really interesting work. In next year or two, I think they will start becoming a lot more mainstream in a lot of ways. But as I said, I mean, a lot of this is dependent on your players in the market, right? If somebody thinks that you are not important enough as a country to get a flavor of AR, VR or IoT, then I mean really people are not going to do that. As I said, I mean one of the problems that we have in India is a lot of people think of market share as the primary driver. They want to run on those musical chairs. As a result, nobody focuses on what consumers really want out there. They give them and the products that they believe are going to sell more without realizing how you could make a user's life better. So, but yeah, I mean I think AR, VR, if there is a bunch of people who take that stance, saying that this has use cases for Indian consumers, I think you will see it becoming more mainstream over next 12-18 months.
As we all know that India is one of the sought after markets when it comes to smartphones. And a lot of companies are setting up their assembly units in India. But now with GST into the picture, how do you think the game is going to be like for the manufacturers out there?
I don't see it changing anything for a manufacturing sector, because I'm pretty sure that the government is cognizant of the investments that have been made in terms of having a better manufacturing ecosystem in the country. I'm pretty sure that they're going to be supportive of that. I don't see GST changing anything with respect to manufacturing strategies. What GST will very interestingly do is, I think it will alter the dynamics of last 3-4 years as you've seen between online and offline, because suddenly now there is no arbitrage in terms of VAT that existed earlier for online players. It's a much more better level playing field. So I think it needs to be seen how the market shifts. But I'm punting that you will see some sheer shifts happening from online to offline.
And Amit, interestingly, I've been observing something for quite some years now. So what happens, a lot of smartphone companies enter the smartphone space and they introduce phones at very attractive prices. And then eventually they move to the price bracket in which premium phones from top-notch players actually compete. And I have observed this for Motorola, I have observed this for Nexus lineup of Google, and now OnePlus is on the same path. So what is the thought behind it, and like what is the strategy that first they come up with value for money phones and eventually they move into the price bracket that become totally exorbitant?
I think it's two things. I mean, a lot of people when they enter the market see pricing as an entry strategy. I mean, if you can increase the value for an end consumer without spending that much money on the marketing and brand building, then you're probably going to have a much better price point, right? I mean, and those price points are interesting to consumers, and consumers come in hordes to buy that. In terms of really taking the price points up, I think it's too, I mean, if you are singularly focused on pricing as a strategy, it's not a sustainable strategy, because supply chains globally, in phone industry give you a limited leverage, right? In terms of one's cost structure being better than somebody else's. But I mean, there is not a lot of difference in those cost structures. So if you keep on harping on the same price point, then as a company, you're not going to survive. It's as simple as that. So companies do need to kind of make sure that they have a portfolio that spans a few product price points, right? Then maybe they want to do a pricing play on a couple of products, which is plausible. But I mean, anyone who's focused completely on pricing to begin with and then wants to move up, that doesn't work. But why they are forced is because that sometimes the economics comes to bite back and say a company cannot keep on doing those price points because, as I said, they are not sustainable.
We all know that you have played an instrumental role in Motorola's India business, and now that you are part of Smartron. So what is your plan? What is the way forward for the company that is yet to actually hold some grounds in the market?
So Smartron, we essentially are not a smartphone company. Right? We are an Internet of Things company. We have multiple areas of interest in terms of hardware as well as software. As I said, we think of ourselves as an Internet of Things company, right? So we have multiple categories. We have phones, we have wearables, we have computing, we have smart homes. We will have play on the enterprise and the infrastructure side of it, and we have on the energy and transportation sector of it, the Internet of Things work. So there is a bunch of things that we are looking at doing at Smartron.
That's all for now, Amit, and I'm really glad to have got some really interesting insights from the man who has known the industry inside and out. Thanks for joining us on WION, and it was really a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you very much for having me on the show. Very good to talk to you again.